Jimmy, this year, from my understanding, and from a lot of people's, I think, like last year things started releasing. This year was PSVR, HTC Vive, and the Oculus Rift all officially launched.
Right.
It's kind of almost the year that these things broke through the door, and now you're seeing VR everywhere. Whereas, there was always skeptics, and I'm sure there still are, but I don't know, myself, and I think a lot more people around the office, and I think a lot more of our audience just kind of okay, it's here to stay. Where do we go from here? Is that kind of your impression too, or am I just kind of alone there, or what?
Sure. I think that, sorry, prior to 2016, everybody thought, or some analysts thought that 2016 would be the year of VR. I think in my eyes, that's not quite the case. It's more like a slow burn than a quick explosion kind of thing. And yeah, as you mentioned, we saw the release of all the major HMDs, the head-mounted displays, and there's it started off with the Oculus Rift. I think that platform had a really rocky launch, but they just recently released their touch controllers, which get your hands into VR, and I feel like they've been able to finish the year strong. Early on they had some HMD shipment issues, they had component shortages. So even if you pre-ordered or backed the Kickstarter, you didn't receive it until multiple months later.
Right.
They also encountered a bunch of negative press from DRM issues and things like that, things that they've backed off on. But now that Touch is here, I think they've made up for a lot of things. And yeah, Rob, as you mentioned, Rob was playing some of those games earlier today. I find them to be really fun. I think he was playing Super Hot VR, which is a game that's redesigned for VR. It's different from the base game, and you feel like you feel like Neo from the Matrix in it. Things slow down. You can dodge bullets. You can shoot enemies, and then their guns will fly in the air. You can catch them in midair and shoot them back.
Right.
So that game is really fun. And then, hot on its heels, the HTC Vive released, and that was the first VR platform to allow you to walk around in sort of a room scale environment. And that was $800, but it is the most sophisticated VR tracking system. And most of the games that released on that platform, I would admit, as a VR enthusiast, I would admit that most of them are shovelware.
Yeah.
But there are several diamonds in the rough. I think the Onward is really good. A bunch of early access stuff. Raw data is really fun as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, HTC was my favorite during preview events because it actually kind of made use of the space around you. I think what do they call it? The chaperones that kind of outline.
Yeah, the chaperone system.
I don't know, we haven't talked too much about PSVR yet, but
sure, yeah.
Of all these platforms, do you have a favorite, or are they kind of obviously as competitors, they kind of offer something different, right?
Yeah,
PSVR seems the most accessible one.
I think they have their strengths and advantages. PSVR, it's the least robust perhaps out of the three, but it is, the most accessible. It starts at $399, and it does a pretty good. It's the cheapest thing, but in my opinion, it punches above its weight class a bit, considering its price tag. And Peter and I talked about it a little bit, and I think before I would have said, in my personal opinion, that the best VR headset is the Vive, but the Rift with touch, I feel like it's much closer now.
Sure.
And I feel like maybe the Rift has slightly better controllers, but the Vive has the better tracking system.
Yeah, the Oculus Touch, it kind of brings that more tactile feel to the VR, which is something we were talking about Resident Evil 7 and how the fact that, obviously it's VR. This is an obvious thing. When they touch you, you're not going to feel in the real world unless it's something vibrating or if it's something that you're holding that's going to react to it.
Sure.
But the Oculus Touch, I felt like that was much more of an actual, this kinetic thing that I was using, whereas the HTC Vive, the remotes, and the PlayStation remotes didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, so I think the touch controllers they represent your hands more, whereas the the PlayStation Move and the Vive, they're more abstract. They're more like things that you hold. So it's with the Vive wands, it's you're holding a gun or you're holding a sword, whereas the touch is more these are your hands.
Yeah.
And there's quasi finger tracking, so you can point and you can give the thumbs up gesture and things like that.
Sure.
Which help in co-op games. It's hey, look at that, or nice job and so forth.
Yeah, I do want to get into the game libraries, the
Sure.
software that these are supporting, and vice versa. But I don't know, there are some that we seem to have different tastes. Pete, you've been liking a lot of these third person games, right? I mean, you mentioned
experiences and stuff.
Yeah, Edge of Nowhere and Chronos and things like that.
I like a broad range, I think, of these games, but I have and I used to write off the idea of third-person stuff in VR because I was like, what's the point? That's not why I'm excited about this. But it turns out that like great gameplay can translate over to VR, and you can benefit in ways, such as immersion that appear in storytelling and world design. And that was the case with Edge of Nowhere. And it was also the case with Chronos in an interesting way because that game uses a fixed camera where every time you enter a new room, the camera is positioned in one place or another. Think the original Resident Evil, right? But your head is the camera in that regard, which I found super fascinating because I'm a big fan of that old style. So it might not be the most compelling use of the new technology, but I thought it definitely elevated what was there already. But again, I think a lot of it comes down to the platform. Like I've used Touch and Vive, in this sort of like small room scale settings, and I gotta agree with you. Like I like the Rift better in that regard. And like the Vive is just so hard to set up. It's such a pain in the butt. Like I've gotten so close to tracing the space like in my home, and it's like, oh, you're 1 inch off, and it's like, I don't care about that 1 inch. You care, but let me freaking play the game. So I find it hard. There's the barrier to entry for me to play Vive games is higher. Whereas for Rift and PlayStation VR, it's very simple, in a lot of ways. But longevity is also a thing too. And wearing the PlayStation VR headset, it's super comfortable.
It is the most comfortable headset.
Yeah, to see the other companies go for maybe the higher specs where Sony focused in on value, but then they also were able to nail just the ease of the use and comfort. That's pretty great. So sometimes that can dictate what type of game I want to experience.
Sure. I feel like there would be like an awesome headset if you can like combine their best aspects, like PlayStation VR's comfort, the Vive's tracking, and like the Oculus Rift's like controllers. That would be like perfect.
I know.
Yeah, that's what I played a few preview events, and the Defense Grid 2, that tower defense game, had this really cool, like, it would give you, it's being a tower defense game, you have a set path, and there's these minions coming through that you're defending against. And I didn't even think about this, but then once I played, I was like, that makes sense in VR, which is like, I guess a lot of these experiences, once you actually experience it, it makes sense. But you have this bird's eye view of the grid itself, and then you can kind of just look down instead of having to scroll through. I keep waiting for more people to do like large-scale RTS games, or even like XCOM. XCOM 2, I think, being one of my
strategy
favorite
games are amazing in VR. Like you basically play as God and you control units.
You don't have to scroll the screen. You're just above it. You look down. You can, instead of like pressing a bumper or pressing like E to rotate the map, you just look around a corner, like physically look around it, point to where you want these guys to go, like pick them up and drag them. I can't wait for more like things like that. You said they're coming. I can't wait for that because those are like my most anticipated experiences.
Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of games, like as you mentioned, like third-person games that work. That I would argue you could have it on a traditional TV, but that are more immersive in VR. I think like Thumper and Rez satisfy those requirements as well. Like those games can be played on TV, but playing Thumper in VR is much more immersive.
Dude, it's it's hard to communicate until you try it. But if you've ever want to feel overwhelmed in like the best way possible, play Thumper in VR.
Yeah, it feels like apocalyptic, but in a very cool Tron way.
Yeah, it's like you're on the front of a bullet train and it's just speeding ahead 1,000 miles an hour, and a monster is staring at you like. It's crazy.
Yeah, I am looking forward to next year. From what I see, a lot of the games that I've had fun with, a lot of people are having fun with, and this is not a catch-all thing. I feel like the games that we're praising, a lot of them are the ones that kind of hide the limitations of VR at this point. Like Thumper, like it's cool, it gives you a really good view, but I feel like we still haven't hit that point where a lot of we're seeing VR's full potential. And I'm sure it's not going to happen right away.
Yeah, I think Rob was playing Room in a Chair, which is a game that
Chair in a Room.
I always say that. I don't know why.
The other one would be more impressive, actually.
Yeah, but that's a game that uses room scale. So it basically, the environments are all very small room-like environments. Right. And if you have a room like that's big enough, then you don't need to like teleport or anything like that. So it just works within the constraints of the game.
Yeah, and does it have horror aspects to it, from what I understand?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a horror game.
Okay, because that's what. Resident Evil 7's coming out and has full PSVR support, and you can actually just do a playthrough regular on a flat screen, and then you could reload that checkpoint or go from the next save next time you play in VR. I'm excited for that because you don't have to dedicate one playthrough and commit to VR, or if you really like VR, you don't have to commit to a single screen playthrough. I, as a big fan of horror games, I still haven't played anything that really impresses me in the genre on VR.
So try this game. I think what it does well is that it takes advantage of what VR can do. So like you might turn your head around and all of a sudden the scene changes and you're like, what is going on? But the game is about like how you're like a psych patient, you're going crazy, and are things real? You don't know. And VR messes with your head appropriately in that space.
So overall, what are your two takes? I mean, Jimmy, you wrote the report card for VR. I don't think it's up yet. It will be up soon, or is it?
I'm in the process of writing it
Cool.
now.
So it'll be up soon. That'll be like more in-depth thoughts from Jimmy. But I don't know. In general, I think it was a pretty good year.
Yeah, I think it's not. It wasn't going to explode on the scene like the Wii did. But I think it's more of a slow burn, and I think it has a bright future ahead of it.
Yeah, Pete, you've been optimistic about VR for a while, and it seems like your suspicions and your expectations are proving fruitful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely landed. Like, it's here. I don't hear skeptics anymore. Like, I don't feel like there is that loud segment of the audience being like, VR is stupid, no one wants it. I think at this point, everyone can look at it and say, yeah, I've heard this one thing is rad, or I played this one thing and it's really rad. Like, everyone has a touchstone now where they care about VR one way or another. And if you look at something like Google Earth VR,
have you tried that?
Not yet, no. But
man, it's amazing.
But that's the thing,
sounds
is
awesome.
that everyone says that.
Yeah.
right?
So I want to mention one quick thing about that. So that's an app that was made by Google that takes the Google Earth API and then they like retrofitted it to work in VR. But it feels to me like it was built for VR. And I was reading on Reddit and things like that. Like grown men put it on. They like fly to like where they grew up as a kid, and they sit on like their old rooftops, and they would just start crying because it's just like a nostalgia machine.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's very interesting. I put it on. I did the same thing, and I got very nostalgic and kind of sad.
Talk about virtual reality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just giving us a fantastic world. It's replicating, I think, the dream is that something is so convincing, right? And what is more convincing than reality? And this has sort of achieved that in a way that hits, the threshold is hit. And so we get there.
That's not how good it looks, is it?
Yeah.
It is.
Holy shit.
So it's not fake, right? So all the stuff is actually real rendered from like satellites.
Yeah.
And you can actually zoom out and see the Earth in outer space and look up at all the stars around you, and they're real. They're not like computer drawings. They're actually like real life.
That's insane.
Photo telemetry.
Man, I really need to try that out.
Yeah.
So when you see something like this, I think there's no way you can be cynical about VR.
Right.
And if this came in the first year of this wave, dude, give it 5 years, give it 20 years.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, that's
I don't
awesome.
think anyone can be cynical about that.
Damn. All right, cool. Well, things seem to be looking up for VR, so I'm optimistic about it. I still have a lot of games to play. This is the first year we've had like an actual VR category for end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Last year, again, it was still burgeoning, so it seems like it's starting to, like you said, slow burn. So looking forward to that. If you are watching this after we record it live, our VR report card should be up on site as of now, so you can go read Jimmy's more in-depth thoughts on GameSpot.com.